Okay, test 1, 2, 3. Now I'm using Zoom, not my old screencast-o-matic. And it's Dr. Palermo on September 14th with a week 3 video message for my EDCI 706 ladies, the Goldsboro cohort. I hope that you all are well. School has started. I hope you're settling into a routine there. I hope that you're working on your graduate work. We have, well, some readings and some responses to do this week. I hope that you're working on your evidences and making good progress on those. I want to go back and comment. I just did read some of the dialogue posts for last week, week 2, and in particular, y'all are talking about implementing change there. As far as external communication, that's talking about where are you going to present these results? Are they going to be presented that is externally in your school, to school leadership, or to district leadership? Some of you mentioned names, but that's the big thrust there. Start thinking about who the audience is. You might think about the politics too. Zoe, it sounds like your program could be a political minefield. That is, I'm not sure if you're already thinking that it's ineffective. Are the reasons why some folks want to keep it? At any rate, sometimes when we think that we're making good decisions based on the data, we still have to remember what the politics are and whether folks want to hear that response or not. The SCEP resources for family and community stuff, that's great. Make sure that as you're reading Hall and Hoard, that you are reading this stuff carefully. In chapter 2, I'm not sure I emphasize those functions as much as I should, but I'm going to give you an example talking about the implementation of the IC maps that harken back to those functions of developing, articulating the vision, planning, professional learning, checking progress. So pretty much every chapter, every page in Hall and Hoard is important and going to have application in your efforts to change practices at your school. So you're implementing change efforts. If you don't know that, you're through your FCEP trying to increase family and community involvement, you're implementing a change. And in looking at the program evaluation, you are maybe recommending keeping or ditching a program or greatly enhancing the mentoring program, which is, again, implementing a change. So read on. In Hall and Hoard this week, it's chapter 3. That is about the implementation configuration maps. Now, this is either a really simple idea or a very complex idea that may seem simple to some. But we've got to kind of break down and step back also from the many change efforts that have been implemented at our schools and think about how does this process actually work. Well, I love Hall and Hoard. Their definitions are actually laughable sometimes. Change, what it is, what it isn't, innovation, adaptations. You know, my wife is suggesting that I make a change in my diet and exercise in order to lose weight. How invested am I in that change? Not so much, but same thing in schools. If folks don't want to do something, change doesn't just happen because the district says it's going to or the principal says it's going to. So keep that in mind, please. An implementation configuration map is nothing more than a roadmap, a plan, a chart about how we're going to get from one place to another, how a change is going to be implemented. There's a really fancy implementation configuration map here from the state of Kentucky about how the Common Core standards were going to be rolled out in the state of Kentucky. And this is a tool that is, it looks like it is meant for the central office. So it was rolled out from the State Department in Kentucky to central office staff, those are the audiences, and how these Kentucky core academic standards were to be measured and implemented. So to establish and communicate expectations for high quality, that is from chapter 2 about the implementation change. Developing, articulating, and communicating a shared vision of the intended change. Using Hall and Hoard, this stuff is embedded in this very fancy, long, detailed implementation configuration map. Now, this isn't the only way that maps have to look, but here's a really good example of a very detailed one. They took their maps and they put it in terms of the expectation and then said, here is 5 being the lowest, 1 being the highest. Here are things that you should see or be able to observe if this change is being implemented. Establish a common vocabulary. Well, if it's not happening at all, or if it is happening in the staff and we're all using the common vocabulary about assessment, then that is helping to achieve this goal of assessment literacy. Not going to spend too much time there, but there is a really good, fancy example of an implementation configuration map. Now, again, they don't always have to look that fancy because I have loaded one in here. I started thinking through a change that we accomplished at Lufkin when I was there. We wanted to start walkthroughs. Now, walkthroughs can mean lots of different things to lots of different folks. In this case, there were no teachers' names on it. What we were doing was walking through the school and trying to collect data about how often Marzano's 9 were being accomplished. Now, I'm assuming that maybe you know about this book. It is Classroom Instruction That Works. CITW is the abbreviation that I'm using. There are 9 strategies in here that Marzano says if you use these, it will increase student achievement. It's all research-based stuff. So reinforcement, posting objectives, helping kids understand sameness and difference, having high quality homework expectations, non-linguistic representations, that is bubble maps and stuff, cooperative learning. Marzano says these 9 things, if you do them in your school, you're going to get better student achievement. It's proven, it's research-based. Okay, so once upon a time, I was at a school and assuming that change doesn't just happen but has to be led and that it is a series of events and interventions in Hall and Hoard's words, for this change to be successful, for us to increase the amount of CITW Marzano 9 that we were doing at my school, here were the steps that I took. So this is the beginning of an intervention configuration map. These are the things that I wanted to have done. Introduce the concepts, give them copies of the book, provide training to the staff, train the assessors, create a schedule, begin the walkthroughs, analyze the data, present the data to the staff. By the way, again, the data was simply on September 14th between 9 and 10. We walked through the whole school, every single classroom. Here's how many times we saw objectives being posted. Here's how many times we saw best practices for homework. Here's how many times we saw comparisons with similarities and differences being modeled for students. We just did a snapshot to collect that data, and we shared that data with the staff, and we started conversations. Why do you think we didn't see more of this? Why do you think we saw a lot of that? So then we would repeat those steps. But it has to, you also would have to add to this. Again, this is just a start on my IC map for that change. I would have to think about who's responsible, what were the outcomes, what are the desired outcomes that we want in each step, how would those outcomes be measured. So if I say that I'm going to train the whole staff in the walkthrough process, what's my desired outcome? The whole staff demonstrating mastery and understanding of the walkthrough process. How do I measure that? So there's a lot of steps that have to be accomplished for a change like this to happen. But if I were going to recommend to a district staff or to my school staff that a change should happen, that we should do walkthroughs, here are some of the steps that I would map out in order to take that implementation configuration map to the people who would make the decision. Okay? That's just an example, but that's the kind of thing that you might think about when you're responding to this dialogue. Thinking about the IC maps, there's my example. As a teacher leader, what key steps would you take to introduce, develop an IC map? So what I'm looking for is like your example at your school of my little example, okay? Don't overthink it, but for a change to happen at your school, what are the steps that have to happen? Go back to Hall and Horde and chapters 2 and 3 if you're not sure. Hall and Horde, 2 and 3 should be a help. Yours certainly does not have to look like that Kentucky implementation configuration map. What else has happened in this week? This is a book that I leaf through and I page through and I read sections. Hall and Horde, I read every page, every word, every paragraph, sometimes 2 or 3 times. This is a great book that I hope that you're going to use as a resource for your PLPA. In particular, in part 2, it talks a lot about creating trust. Okay? If we want to have PLCs that are high functioning, we have to trust one another. So doing a trust survey, like is on page 63, you can't see that from here, but the page 63 is the Trust on Our Team survey. My colleagues willingly share materials, resources, and ideas with me. Okay? If you're at a point where you have PLCs at your school, but they're kind of only functioning in name only, one of the things that you might assess is, what is our level of trust currently? And perhaps part of your PLC plan is going to be to increase the level of trust. How would you do that? You do a survey, you get your baseline, and you say, we want to increase the level of trust across teams. Might be a helpful little survey and tool for you. I don't know. Skim and scan Ferreter and Graham, please, and use that, quote that. I would cite this in your PLPA, but also I hope that there are good tools that are in there for you to use. Now, this says that you're to read the full text of Fullen's Leading in a Culture of Change this week. I want you to read this before we meet again. I'm going to develop an activity for our in-class session October 1st when we meet around Fullen, and I want you to read it before then. I found this book inspirational, and I asked the staff to include it in 706. It is about change. It is about leading change. I read it as a principal with my principal hat on, but I think it really does have lots of applications for all kinds of leaders in school. This is an interesting little model that's on page 4 about the framework for leadership. I do want you to think about that, and I do believe that it's really true. And then again, as where Hall and Horde is really deep, Fullen sometimes can be really succinct and get to the meat of the matter. What is change all about? For results to happen, make more good things happen and fewer bad things happen. I love that kind of stuff. I found this to be a good book to keep beside my bedside when I needed some motivation or I needed a shot in the arm. He's very positive and hopeful and encouraging about leading change in schools. So read this before we meet again next time, please. And we will do an activity around Fullen and leading change. You're asked to respond to tell us about your PEC. I hope that you're working on that. I hope that you're paring down and know exactly what it is that you should be collecting data about. In many cases, you're administering surveys and then trying to collect the data from those surveys. What's going well? Where do you need help? So just a little bit of a reflection about your PLC. And oh, you are to respond to this. Nah, I'm going to close this leading in a culture of change, and I will redirect you to bring this back to our next session. Do read it. You do get started on it. Put it on your bedside table if you haven't got it there already, or looked at it. Again, this is a book that I like a lot, but more inspiration, nuts and bolts, Holland Horde, nuts and bolts. So have a great week. Work on your PLPs, your PEs, your FCEPs, please. Keep working on that stuff, and contact me if you're having any questions or concerns. Thanks. Have a great week.